Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. Happy not belated Wednesday, but I guess after a week off from both Brendan and myself, I hope you guys are as recharged as we are, or recharged-ish. But I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast, and joining me with finally a studio in place, or at least half a house in place, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, I hope you had a nice week off. I hope you had a nice Bobless week.
Bobless week. I still talk to you a little bit, so I don't know if it
Yeah.
was really Bobless, but no, it was good. It gave me some time to take care of some things. More than half a house, I think, at this point. Like the downstairs is really nice. So like the portion of the house that people would actually see if they came over looks great. It's the part that nobody else sees outside of like if I were to turn this camera around, you guys would be like, oh boy. But I got my little corner done.
Well,
And
but that's the key. It's the part of the house that no one sees, like you said. So you may not even have to worry about that part until, at the very least, Christmas.
yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I will brag on myself too. I thought I did a good job.
You
I got
did.
Delvin here. You can't really see it just because of the camera angle, but I got Kyle Turley above. So two guys that we've had on the
Mhm.
show before. Outstanding filmmaker, some Funkos, photos of me and some different guys over the years. But yeah, I thought I did okay.
I think you
Especially
did.
without like I'm not one of those hip cool guys that have the little like laser pointer things that make sure everything's even. So I had to kind of just be like, yeah, that looks right. And then you're like, Brendan, why don't you have a level? And it's like, well, when you move, it's the things that you need that are always just nowhere to be found. So like I
Yeah.
didn't have a level. You're like, yeah, I guess that looks about right.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you
extra
did that,
holes.
get that kind of stuff, you wouldn't really need it until the next time you moved. And when that time came, you wouldn't be able to find it again anyway. So
Yeah, it's
that,
just you
that's
you
speaking from experience.
you have it for those purposes, but it's never actually used because you can't find it. So it's one of those things you need to have, but you never actually
Yep.
use. It's like it's a huge oxymoron. It is what it is.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, we're moving through. Before I get too far ahead, because I just mentioned the outstanding filmmaker award that I had from a couple years ago, I wanted to shout out Thomas Manning again, a friend of ours. Concluded his first international film festival as a director. I got to go out one night of the 4 night gig, and I think it was a total of like I want to say like 33 films were screened, somewhere between like 14 and 19 Q&As that he held with different directors, actors, producers, um, whatever, over a 4-day span. So Thomas, I know you're in Canada right now, so you're probably not listening, watching. You should be,
You
but
should be.
when you get this back on Spotify or Apple or whatever, YouTube. Thanks for having me out. Congratulations on putting on a great show. Can't wait for next year. And yeah, good all around job for Mr. Manning. And it's
For
been a good
sure.
all around job for our friends and colleagues covering the New Orleans Saints so far, because they're a long ways away uh,
Mhm.
from home as the Saints doing training camp all the way out on the West Coast, but still have some news hitting home down in New Orleans. Bob, the New Orleans Saints reportedly met with free agent safety Justin Simmons this afternoon. There is no word on whether Simmons has left the facility or whether or not he's staying overnight in New Orleans, but was coming in this afternoon, late afternoon, maybe early evening, to come do a physical and then sit and discuss some things with the Saints. And Dennis Allen going as far today in his media presser to say that there's nothing for sure, to paraphrase, when it comes at the safety spot across from Tyrann Mathieu. So kind of a hint, nudge, nudge that, maybe these conversations with Simmons are more than just a, hey, buddy, how you doing? Why don't you come down and we'll buy you lunch?
Right.
But Bob, Simmons was, I think you could argue, the best available free agent at one point, certainly the best available safety throughout free agency, which begs the question from a lot of fans, at least that I've seen on my social media platforms, are why is he still a free agent? Now, I have my thoughts, and I know you do as well. So why don't you take the floor and tell the people why Justin Simmons is still a free agent this late into the game?
Brendan, like yourself and like a lot of people out there, I can only speculate. But it is kind of a mystery to me. And actually, it's been a mystery to me throughout the entire free agency process, leading up to the draft and even since the draft, really up until the last week. How many big name safeties were still available? I mean, Micah Hyde, Quandre Diggs, who's since signed, Eddie Jackson, who's since signed, Tracy Walker, Caden Stearns is about to be released by the same Denver Broncos team that released Justin Simmons. You figure out what Sean Payton's doing out there. Maybe that thin mountain air is affecting his brain a little bit. I'm not sure. But yeah, I agree with you that Justin Simmons was certainly the biggest free agent name at the safety position. If not at any position still available. And my speculation is, he was in going into the fourth year of a pretty big money deal with the Denver Broncos. One of the reasons why the Broncos released him is to save about $14 million in salary cap space. But the Saints were the first visit, at least official visit, that Simmons had with any NFL team since his release in the first week of March. That's what the surprising thing is to me. I mean, there are a lot of big name free agents, especially if they've been in the league a handful of years, like Simmons has been in the league 8 years now. If they haven't sniffed a championship, some of them hold out for a championship opportunity. So, some speculation was that, maybe Simmons was holding out for the Philadelphia Eagles or the San Francisco 49ers, Kansas City Chiefs, a team like that to come calling. Maybe he was holding out for more money. We're not sure of that. I think the signings of Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, Eddie Jackson within the last week, I think that sort of set the market now for a Justin Simmons. So I don't expect that the Saints will be the only visit that he has. So, Saints fans that were hoping, praying for news today or tomorrow, I would be very surprised if we get it. I believe anyway that Simmons, given his talent and his still level of play, remember he was as recently as last year, he was a Pro Bowler. I would fully expect that he's going to have business lined up with other teams, in short order. The fact that we didn't hear that he exited the team facility yet. Now, I mean, he might have, and just news didn't break. But the fact that we didn't hear that Simmons has left the team facility, I would take as good news. But if you're Justin Simmons, the Denver Broncos have been, frankly, and this pains me to say it, been frankly one of the worst teams in the NFL since he came into the league in 2016. So it's very possible that Simmons is just hoping for a legitimate playoff contender. Now, whether he believes, whether you folks believe that the Saints are that or not, it's the Saints' job, the job of Dennis Allen, the job of Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator, et cetera, to sell Justin Simmons on the fact that, we not only believe that we can win the NFC South, we believe that we can at least contend for the NFC title, and here's why. And then that's the sell. Teams at this point, you have to sell yourself to the free agent rather than the other way around when you're talking about a player of Justin Simmons' caliber.
For me, I think the speculation comes from this, is that Simmons and his team had a number. They made everybody pretty aware of what that number was. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the league said, we're going to let this play out because we don't want to be stuck as the people that overpay.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the running back market last year. Right? How quickly that died out. How quickly we thought Jamal Williams was on a good contract for the Saints and still is. Mm-hmm. But that there were guys that we thought were more talented than Jamal Williams who took less money than he did when he signed with the Saints. That's the scary thing about free agency as well, and especially free agency in the modern NFL, where you have contracts being renegotiated every year for media rights. The salary cap gets adjusted every year. by millions of dollars. And sometimes the estimate is right on the money. Sometimes the estimate is off by a little bit. And sometimes you have a hell of a lot more money than you know what to do with. So I think there were teams. I know that there were teams that said, okay, Justin, great. Here's our number. You give us a call when you're closer to this. And that's just kind of how it played out. And like you said, Bob, you've seen some safeties, recently over the last few weeks sign contracts. So that kind of sets a bar. That sets the market, right? It's a comp. You can go, well, Justin Simmons, good safety, Pro Bowl safety. This guy signed and he's a borderline Pro Bowler. Here's a comp. How much more do you think Justin Simmons is worth than this? That's the game that they're playing, right? Everybody wants to get the best deal possible.
Sure.
Right? That's how it goes. For you guys that are listening and watching that, like me, are in the sports card type of hobby, it's the same way when you go and try to make deals with people at different shows. You want to get the best deal possible, which means you look up a comp of whatever card you may be looking at and going, hey, well, it just sold for this number. So could you be closer to this number than the number you have listed? That's the same conversations that are going on down in Metairie right now. And will go on with Simmons if he takes other visits, is going, hey, Justin, like your number at, for the sake of an even number, let's say your number at $20 million is great, but look at these other safeties that just signed for like half of that. So can we meet in the middle somewhere, or can we get wherever? I think ultimately that's why Simmons has sat so much, because when you're the best player available at your position, you kind of dictate the market. Whatever you go for and what you sign for, that kind of, it's a trickle down effect, right? Or it's a ripple effect. And that domino has yet to fall. We've seen some other dominoes fall a little bit out of order, but where can Simmons and the Saints, or Simmons and whoever he goes to, find a number where everybody's happy? Do I ultimately think Simmons wants to take a 1-year, like, prove it deal like Chase Young did? No, because I think he's proven what his value is. Unlike Chase Young, who's been hurt and he's had some ups and downs, like that made a whole lot more sense. Simmons isn't going to be interested in give me a 1-year deal for whatever to prove to you guys.
Right.
With all that said, though, Bob, it is a big position of need. On the unofficial depth chart the Saints released ahead of their preseason Week 1 matchup, Jordan Howden was listed as the safety across from Tyrann Mathieu, which we both thought that Howden had some moments last year, had some flashes, proved that he could be a productive safety at the NFL level. However, I'm not sure if he's ready to be the starting safety on a team that has playoff aspirations, has aspirations of winning the division, has aspirations of being, labeled as one of, if not the best secondary in football, because on paper, as we like to say here, they certainly look like one of the best, if not the best secondary in football. So bringing in a guy like Justin Simmons, I think that solidifies yourself as the best secondary in football. It gives you a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, who's going to have a case to be a Hall of Famer, next to a guy who's been a Pro Bowler in recent memory and consistently in recent memory. So pair that with Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor. Everything we're hearing out of camp right now is that he's really embracing that slot role.
Yeah.
You have Paulson Adebo, who's started to make that leap a little bit. And then, let's not forget Kool-Aid, who you drafted in the second round, gets to sit behind all those guys and watch and learn. And Jordan Howden, who I just mentioned. So do the Saints need Justin Simmons? Need is tough. It's a tough word. Would it vastly improve the roster, maybe vastly improve the way that this team is looked at from a national perspective? Abso-freaking-lutely. But like Bob said, I wouldn't sit there and anticipate and have your alarm set for 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, waiting for that news to pop off, because I don't think a deal is going to get done today. I don't think a deal is going to get done tomorrow. If I was Simmons and I was his camp and I was his agent, and I was his representatives, I'd say, hey, Justin, look, great. Awesome. You're interested. They're interested. That's great. Let's see if we can get you some more money or maybe a better opportunity somewhere else. That's just good business. And I think ultimately that's probably what's going to happen.
I think so too. But it's going to it is still going to happen in quick order, I think. I believe that Justin Simmons is going to end up on a team probably no later than early next week. In fact, I'll make a prediction. Not only before we go on the air next Wednesday night, I'll predict that by the time or before Alan and I go on the air Tuesday night on the Under the Dome broadcast, that Justin Simmons will be on a team. Because again, everybody is going to have at least one preseason game in the books by the end of this weekend. At that point, every team that is interested in Justin Simmons, New Orleans Saints included, is going to have a better feel for what they do currently have at the safety position. And I think at that point, the offers then become solidified to Simmons. Right now, as you alluded to, whatever the New Orleans Saints have tentatively offered or are interested in offering Justin Simmons, him and his team, his representatives, are going to take that to any other team that's interested in, hey, can you better this? Not only with the financial deal, but tell me why I should sign with the Dallas Cowboys or whoever else it's going to be. And and then the back and forth starts. Well, that back and forth is going to stop by this weekend's preseason games. At that point, every team is going to say, okay, here's our final offer if it changes at all. And then Simmons, the ball is going to be in Simmons' court to make a final decision by early next week. Now, his fit with the New Orleans Saints, he's the type of safety that he's the type of prototype safety that Dennis Allen has always loved. A versatile player, big, physical, enough to play at the line of scrimmage, but because of his coverage abilities, Denver didn't ask him to do that a whole lot. And those coverage abilities allow him to play the slot. He's athletic enough and has good enough instincts to not only excel in a two-high safety system alignment, but even lined up as a more traditional free safety in a single-high alignment. He has, I think, 30 interceptions over his 8-year career. Only 2 years removed from leading the league with 6 interceptions, had 3 last year. Has been a first or second team All-Pro every single year since 2019. And you keep talking about Tyrann Mathieu. If I'm a safety, I'm also looking at a prospective team's cornerback unit. How many opportunities am I going to have because quarterbacks are going to be throwing away from this cornerback or throwing away from that cornerback? Safeties are going to have a lot of opportunities in this defense. Tyrann Mathieu, Justin Simmons, Jordan Howden, a guy I don't think people were talking enough about, Will Harris, all those guys are going to have opportunities because you have a bona fide elite shutdown corner in Marshawn Lattimore, a player in Paulson Adebo that's this close to moving into the top tier of corners in the NFL. Alontae Taylor, who had a fabulous rookie season, and you and I both think is going to bounce back strong after some ups and downs last year, and a first-round talent in rookie Kool-Aid McKinstry. You can't name me a team with 4 better corners than the New Orleans Saints. So for safeties like Tyrann Mathieu, Justin Simmons, etc., it's going to be added opportunities, to make plays, to create turnovers, to win football games, and at the end of the day, to get more money. And not only does Simmons' style fit what Dennis Allen wants to do, and I wrote about all this in my article about Simmons and why he is a good fit for the New Orleans Saints. Check out that article earlier this morning on my profile, either on my profile pages, either on Facebook or Twitter. Back in 2016, when Denver drafted him, the head coach of the Broncos was Gary Kubiak. Now, we know who Gary Kubiak is the father of, but on that Broncos staff in 2016, 2017, 2018, Clint Kubiak, Rick Dennison, now those are offensive guys. Here's what's more important. The defensive coordinator on those Bronco teams, Joe Woods. The defensive back coach on those teams, Marcus Robertson. currently the defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach for the New Orleans Saints. So in other words, Justin Simmons would step right into the scheme that he's familiar with, the scheme that he came into the league with, and the coaches that drafted him in the first place. I think even in today's generation of athlete, I do think that if dollars are even all across the board, and talent level on the teams that want you are all across the board, the coaches make the difference. And in Kubiak and Dennison on the offensive side, and obviously Woods and Robertson on the defensive side, there's a feeling of there's familiar territory here for Justin Simmons. So I think that that's something to keep an eye on too as this process plays its way out.
Do want to throw this out there. Report coming from Nick Underhill that Simmons and the Saints are at dinner this evening, and not to expect any news tonight, given the timing, but it is possible.
That sounds like someone that just said that, Brendan. Two guys, two ordinary guys. I'm just saying.
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, like, it makes sense. Like, if you're not taking your physical until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, well, they're going to let you go back to your hotel, get comfortable, make some phone calls, get some dinner reservations, maybe get the tour of the facility while somebody's working on all that. So you get your physical done. Let's say you start at 3, your physical's done at 4. You get a facility tour. You're done by 5. You go back to your hotel 6 o'clock. Your representatives and whoever are talking about different numbers and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, let's go grab dinner. Pretty straightforward.
Well, yeah, and remember, folks, too. Yeah, the New Orleans Saints are out on the West Coast right now. It's 6:28 in the evening out there, so it is dinner time. And if I'm the Saints, and I want to make a hard push on a free agent like Justin Simmons, once I get him in the facility, I'm going to do everything I can to keep him from leaving for sure. But sometimes that's not realistic. What is realistic and what is in your control is what you just said. You can take him on the tour of the facilities. You can let him watch practice, maybe even sit in on a meeting or two. If you do that, you certainly have to like your chances of signing him. And then after that, hang out with him a little bit, go to dinner. You don't have the added advantage of being in New Orleans, so you can't show him around, the city that he would prospectively be living in. But your point was, you have to account for every single minute with this player to try to get inside his head, to try to build your own impression on him. So that way, if and when he does leave and go somewhere else, hopefully you planted that seed that's going to just grow inside of his brain and inside of his heart. You know what? Yeah, this visit with the Philadelphia Eagles, they were pretty good, but New Orleans really made an impression on me. Those coaches, the general manager, the owner, the players there that I met with, they just, I like what they have going on in New Orleans, and that stays with you throughout the process.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal. Any of you guys that have been college athletes or even just prospectively looking at colleges, it's the same deal.
Yep.
Right. What do you end up finding yourself doing, Bob? You go on one visit, you go to the next visit, and you go, how does this measure up to the last one? Is this better than the last one? Is this?
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up even not sports, but doing some broadcast work for a school. I went, well, how does it match up with this one? How does it match up with this one? And after I left Gardner-Webb, everything was, well, that's great, but I really like what Gardner-Webb did here. That's great, but I really like this better. And it's going to be the same thing. You're playing the same mental mind games. You're trying to plant seeds, right? And I think that's another thing people get way too caught up in free agency and all these different things is it's a sales pitch. And a lot of times your most effective sales pitches are not, slamming the table and going, let's get this deal knocked out right now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your most effective sales pitches are, let me just plant the seed, right? I'm going to plant the seed. We're going to come back to it later and we're going to reap what we sowed, right? And sometimes that's the way to do it, and sometimes it is like, hey, let's hammer it out right now.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. But I'd say probably 60-70% of the time, it's more let's just plant the seed and see what happens. There are special circumstances, right? And I can think of one of the guy who's I got the jersey right behind me, right? What was the famous quote from Sean Payton with Delvin Breaux? Is like, we were not letting him leave the building.
Yeah.
Right? There are special circumstances, but a guy like this and Simmons who sat on the market for this long, yeah, you're competing against 31 other teams or whatever, whatever it may be, who's really actually interested in Simmons, but this isn't like, oh, we got to get this hammered out now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. We'll see ultimately what it is. But based off those reports and what you're saying, Bob, it's like 6:30 out there on the West Coast. Do I expect to hear something tonight? No.
Yeah.
Would I be super shocked if I hear something, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning breaking news from Adam Schefter? Like, I wouldn't be super shocked. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't expect to hear anything today. I wouldn't expect to hear anything tomorrow. I do want to touch on this because it came up in the comments. And I think it's an interesting point, and it comes from DJ, who is a loyal watcher and listener of the Bayou Blitz. So thanks, DJ, for tuning in for, the probably a millionth time, but who's counting? He said, look, apparently the number for Simmons is around $18 million a year.
It's about right.
But what about Alvin Kamara? How does that affect Alvin Kamara in his contract negotiations? It doesn't, but it is an interesting point for a fan to bring up and say, hey, look, like money-wise, like how does this affect a guy that you want to retain your own? So how do we retain our own? And what kind of impression does that leave on Alvin Kamara if we're going to go grab a guy for $18 million but not pay him?
I tell you what, it leaves a decent impression on Alvin Kamara because you still have him under contract. If you're the New Orleans Saints, you have probably gone to given the type of organization. And the way that the New Orleans Saints, Mickey Loomis, Gail Benson, Tom Benson before that, Sean Payton before that, the way they've all handled themselves and the way they've handled their players loyalty-wise. A player of Alvin Kamara's caliber, chances are very, very good that you're not going to offer a player like Justin Simmons, a bigger deal without going to Alvin first and say, look, this is what we have in mind. We need Simmons. We feel like we need Simmons for our roster and for our defense. We haven't forgotten about you. I understand the question, DJ, and I empathize with it, but it's really an apples and oranges comparison. And mainly because you look at the Saints and over the history of Mickey Loomis as the general manager, think of how many big name free agents, core players that the New Orleans Saints have realistically let walk out the door. There haven't been many. In other words, the Saints have always done a good job of keeping their own. And you can't look at it as, oh, if you're going to sign Justin Simmons, then you're not going to be able to re-sign Alvin Kamara. The only time that usually applies is when it's a player of the same position. So in other words, you don't really have any other Saints safeties coming up as free agents. So let's say, for example, Justin Simmons was a cornerback, and you were trying to bring him in, and you signed him to whatever deal he's looking for. At that point, then you can say, okay, Paulson Adebo is going to be a free agent at the end of this year. Alontae Taylor is going to be a free agent at the end of the following year. If you bring in Justin Simmons for a 3-year deal on an average of about $18 million a year, then you're definitely not re-signing Adebo and or Taylor, if not both. Mainly because it's the same position. And again, I moved, Simmons to a cornerback, for the sake of this argument. A contract to Simmons would have nothing to do with a pending contract to an Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, who's going to be coming up as free agency at the end of next year. At least eligible for a 5th-year option. It usually only applies to players at the same position.
So we'll continue with some of the comments and questions. A little off topic, but I wanted to get to it because it is interesting. And we talked about guys who have sat and waited on the free agency market. You know exactly where this is going, don't you? Michael Thomas, still available. No chance that the Saints are bringing him back. I know they've had some injuries, and they brought a familiar face back in Marquez Callaway, who Bob's laughing. I always liked Marquez, not as the number
I did
one,
too.
not as the number two, maybe not even the number three, but a solid guy who we had hopes for breaking out and had a decent year. Like, even the year he was the number one receiver, like, you look back at the numbers and you go, you know what, for a guy who was not supposed to be the number one receiver, did okay. But albeit Mike Thomas still available. The comments, and I've already lost it because you guys are incredible tonight, throwing everything into the chat, but essentially saying it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that his career could potentially be over. Do you see it that way, or are you more saying Michael Thomas is probably waiting for a situation where someone gets injured in the preseason and needs to find a suitor like that, hoping, if you will, that a playoff contender or a Super Bowl contender has some sort of need because of injury, and he's just waiting in the wings?
Yeah, I believe it's more that case. I believe that Michael Thomas is hoping, that a receiver on a contender or on a on paper contender, gets hurt sometime in the next week or two. The Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, who have a woefully thin receiving core as it is. KC Chiefs, Dallas Cowboys, Philly Eagles, any of those guys. Hey, if the rumors are true that Brandon Ayuk is actually going to get traded from the 49ers, and I'm now starting to believe that might just happen, Michael Thomas could end up in San Francisco. You tell me he wouldn't excel and probably thrive if he could stay healthy in a Kyle Shanahan West Coast offense. That's tailor-made for him. But yeah, I mean, Michael Thomas, and we said this from the start, Brendan, and Alan Ulrich agreed with us the entire time that Michael Thomas was unlikely to sign with the team right away. And that obviously didn't happen. That we believe that Michael Thomas was more so looking for money, looking for a chance to win a championship. That's why I pointed out the contenders that I just did. And none of those guys, save for maybe the Dallas Cowboys and certainly the Buffalo Bills, none of them are really in the market for a wide receiver right now. Things could change very quickly in the preseason, as we all know. A freak injury here, freak accident there, and all of a sudden, teams are scrambling to get a guy like Michael Thomas, who, oh my God, I can't believe he's still on the free agent market, a la Justin Simmons. Is there a chance Mike ends up back in New Orleans? Not unless Dennis Allen gets fired and Derek Carr gets cut as of like this instant. As long as Carr and DA is still in New Orleans, Michael Thomas won't be. Those battle lines were very clearly drawn at the midway point of last season. Michael Thomas is the one who drew those battle lines, which still mystifies me because there's no way he was going to win that battle. And sure enough, he didn't. I think Michael Thomas ends up on a team, though. If he doesn't end up on a contender in the scenario that I painted out in the next 2 weeks or so, he's just going to have to bite the bullet and sign a 1 year prove it deal. For one of the lesser lesser favored teams in the NFL, just something to keep him active, and something to get him back on the treadmill. But I certainly do not believe that Michael Thomas has played his last NFL down.
I think it would be crazy to assume that. Yes, the injuries, but we've seen way too many receivers, especially, that get picked up and you forget that they were on a team that made a run, right? Like, two that come to mind automatically. And say what you will about Michael Thomas and his career and, whether these are fair. I'm not even making comparisons. These just happen to be guys that I remember, but both these guys are Hall of Fame / borderline Hall of Fame. So like Randy Moss with the Niners, like, people don't remember that. Late in his career, making a push for a Super Bowl. And a lot of people forget that Ocho Cinco was also with the New England Patriots during one of their Super Bowl runs and has a reception in a Super Bowl. Guys don't remember that. And I think whatever happens with Michael Thomas, as much as I, as a fan of Michael Thomas, hope that he finds success somewhere, I think that's what's going to be remembered at the end of Michael Thomas's career, is going back and being like, that's weird. Like, I don't remember Michael Thomas wearing a blank jersey.
Right.
one of those things. And we can play that game all we want with different players, right? It's like, oh, did you remember so-and-so actually played for whatever? Like, anybody remember like Randy Moss playing for like the Titans? Like, anybody remember that? No? Great. So there's plenty of examples like that. Obviously, the more famous examples, Montana, the Chiefs, and right? Like, there's examples like that too. But anyway, let's move on to the fact the Saints play football this week. That's exciting. It feels like forever since we've seen the New Orleans Saints play, and it's kind of different. And it's weird to say this because not making the playoffs, Saints fans might be like, "Oh, like sour taste in your mouth, like missing out on the playoffs by a game for the second straight year." But a lot of Saints fans were like very satisfied with how the season ended because they beat the brakes off of Atlanta, right? And then the whole Jameis Winston thing and the legend that is Jameis Winston. Right? Like, I think just based off that in general, like, forget how that tenure went with Jameis. I'm biased, but I think a lot of Saints fans are going to remember Jameis fondly simply for that, right? You can erase everything else, but simply for that, I think he's going to be remembered fondly. And also week 1 Jameis, like, right? The game against Green Bay and then the game against Atlanta. Like, there's something there. Week 1 Jameis.
Yeah, if every week could be week 1, Jameis Winston's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. But the Saints play this week. Obviously, the Saints are not in a situation like other teams, right? You've already had news that like Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play in the preseason. You've had news that Kyler Murray is not going to play because he's coming back from injury. Like, the Saints don't have that issue at quarterback, which is nice, right? You will see a little bit of Derek Carr. I think a lot of people are really interested in the Jake Haener versus Spencer Rattler for number 2. Nate Peterman's been officially cut, if you guys missed that, because it did get kind of blown under the rug. And that wasn't really newsworthy, but it is now a 3-person race, if you will. Really a 2-person race. Derek Carr's going to be the starter. But let's talk about Jake Haener because we have had some time off and we haven't had to talk about this. I don't know if you even want to call it a scare, but anytime you hear the word cancer,
that's scare.
It's a scare. Yeah, it's a scare. So Jake Haener had a very rare form of skin cancer, and that came up after it was noticed he was wearing a bandage on his face throughout early parts of camp. All the reports are that it was resolved earlier in the week.
Hey, he's back out on the field today, so that's a good sign.
So everything's a good sign. But that is a scary word anytime that gets thrown around. Now, Haener's had a decent start. However, I think it's unfair. And this is crazy to say because we're talking about backup quarterbacks. And we've talked about this before. They're backup quarterbacks. And Haener's super talented guy, right? Spencer Rattler, super talented guy. But the new car smell of Jake Haener is already like worn off because everybody's like Spencer Rattler, and I feel bad because now Haener didn't do himself any favors getting suspended the first 6 weeks of the season last year and what have you. But there's really not a lot of attention on Jake Haener, and I think this is a good opportunity, especially week 1, depending on how many snaps he gets, to bring himself back to the frontal lobe of people's minds. Dust off the files and be like, wow, that Jake Haener kid, he can really play ball. Or this is the reason the Saints selected him. Now, the same goes for Spencer Rattler, right? You could continue to ride the hot wave of, being on, the front lobe of Saints fans' minds. Had the quote about Olave, has been featured on the Saints social media quite a bit this week. You could ride that hot hand and go out and have a killer showing in the fourth quarter against guys who are not even going to make the NFL. And everybody's going to be like, oh, Spencer Rattler's what did you say at the beginning when he got drafted? Future Hall of Famer, lock-in, shoe-in Hall of Famer, Spencer Rattler.
I see it now.
Now, with all that said, you guys know, and you guys that were here on the draft, when that pick came through, I was ecstatic. Because I think he's a super talented kid. Why not take a chance in the 5th round? And remember, like, not but 2 or 3 years ago, people were saying, like, he's a shoe-in Heisman finalist. He's a shoe-in this at Oklahoma. And it just, bad situation. He matured a little bit, went to South Carolina. And shoot, I mean, yeah, it's South Carolina. Like, they're not even the best team in the state most years, but they went and beat Clemson for the first time in like 14 years.
Yeah.
And they were kind of relevant there at the end. So with all that said, that is a really interesting thing. I feel bad again because Haener's not being talked about. Haener had a scary health situation that people were not really talking about either. But all in all, that's the position a lot of people are going to be focused on. Bob, I know you have other positions that you're going to be focused on. Touch on the quarterbacks just a little bit, and let's jump to some other positions.
Well, yeah. I mean, most fans, most Saints fans are going to be focused on that quarterback position. But remember, it's a backup spot. I will say this: I think both quarterbacks have to play at least reasonably well. Otherwise, the Saints are going to be, the Saints are going to be wondering then into next week. Do we need to bring back a veteran quarterback? Maybe even bring back a Nate Peterman. Give Ryan Tannehill a call. See what Joe Flacco is up to. In other words, you need. I'm not going to say you need. Haener and Rattler both have to play well enough to convince Clint Kubiak and Dennis Allen that they don't need to bring in a veteran quarterback with some starting experience. So that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I'm going to say it over and over and over and over again and over and over and over and over again. Derek Carr's job is not in jeopardy, but Haener and Rattler both have to play well. Otherwise, the Saints could be bringing in a veteran quarterback for at least a look. But this is not as interesting as this competition is going to be through the rest of the preseason. It's not going to likely not going to affect whether the Saints go to the playoffs or not. The positions I'm going to be watching, offensive line first and foremost.
Yes.
Because a lot of training camp has been 7-on-7s and just some one-on-one light pity pat drills. Training camps are just not as physical as they used to be. So, in other words, we're hearing, and I've seen some decent things out of Fuaga. I've seen some decent things out of even Trevor Penning. Fuaga, I still think is going to be a star. Such great upper body strength and technique and outstanding footwork. Penning looks more comfortable on the right side than he ever looked on the left side. But they haven't lined up against anybody with a different color uniform yet when the defenders are actually allowed to hit the quarterback and et cetera. So how are these guys going to play? The left guard competition, something that I have been harping about since free agency, that I expected that the Saints would bring in several players to compete for this spot, and they did. But I was hoping that at least one of these players would take command of the competition early on, so that way Clint Kubiak gets a fairly good idea of who his starting five is going to be up front, so he can get them together as many reps as possible. Well, it's a concern to me because no one really has. Shane Lemieux's been dinged up. Nick Saldiveri's been dinged up and inconsistent. Lucas Patrick, we think, is going to get the start on Saturday. Is he going to take command of that spot, or is it still going to be a close race? So I'm going to be watching Fuaga, the left guard, and Penning very specifically, in the whole offensive line in general. Can an offensive tackle, backup tackle, whether it's Udo, Landon Young, or any of those other guys, Ephraim, the rookie, can any of those guys step up and make it appear like the Saints have some decent depth there for a change? Wide receivers, A.T. Perry, been relatively inconsistent, though he's come on lately. Same with Cedric Wilson. Mason Tipton tweaked a hamstring today, so I doubt we see him on Saturday. Can Wilson and A.T. Perry show that the Saints have some depth at the skill positions other than the same old culprits of Olave, Shaheed, Taysom, and Alvin Kamara? And then defensively, Chase Young's been doing some great things. Carl Granderson's been doing some great things. Isaiah Foskey, man, he's still, the reps I've seen, he still looks lost against the run. He's making some plays as a pass rusher, but he still looks lost against the run. Is Peyton Turner going to continue to be Mr. August? A preseason, dynamo, that just disappears because of injury into the regular season. Those are the kind of things I'm going to be watching. Demario Davis, Pete Werner, unlikely to play. So those linebackers, DeMarco Jackson, a favorite of ours, Jalen Ford, the rookie, Isaiah Stallbird, who's made some plays early in camp. Anthony Orji, who's had a really, really good training camp so far. What's that linebacking core going to look like? We know that the starting three are going to be Demario, Willie Gay, and Pete Werner. But are the Saints going to have any depth at that position? That's what these guys need to show. Kool-Aid McKinstry, I'm really looking forward to seeing Kool-Aid McKinstry play. I just am. I love this kid. And the safety spot. We opened the show by talking about Justin Simmons. Can Jordan Howden now and Will Harris now show the coaches, you know what? Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, Marcus Robertson, we don't need Justin Simmons on this team, and we're going to show you why.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I want to see is, and I've mentioned this before, and not a lot of people like this thought, I got to see some receivers make plays. And you're sitting there going, well, Brendan, what? Well, yeah, injuries have something to do with that. But I was saying this before the injuries. I was saying, yeah, Chris Olave could be the number one, should be the number one guy, could definitely elevate himself into being a top tier wide receiver in the NFL. Like what Rashid Shaheed brings, but still unproven. Has those big flash moments, and we love that. But I need to see that another step. You and I both like A.T. Perry. You guys all know I love North Carolina college guys, and he balled out at Wake Forest, kept the gold and black from the Demon Deacs to the New Orleans Saints. That's kind of funny to go from a Demon Deac.
It is.
But anyway, with all of that said, I mean, another guy unproven, had some moments, mossed on some guys last year, but even gets called out by Dennis Allen early in camp, right? And my concern there is for the receiver depth. Bub Means, I know that you and Kyle spoke to him early, right after he was drafted. Well, he's injured, right? Like we have all these things pop up, and it's going receiver depth. And we've seen in years past how bad it can really get.
Yeah.
Right? When you're comfortable with your receiving corpse and the guys in the room. But no,
I still have PTSD flashbacks when I hear we like the guys that we have in the room.
Yeah, and we always will. But I need to see some of those guys make plays, step up. Obviously, a lot of that starts with the offensive line too. The offensive line's got to give, whether it be Carr, Hayner, or Rattler time. I just realized all the quarterbacks' names end in R or Carr, Rattler, Hayner. It's weird. Little things you pick up when you say it out loud.
Right.
But I need to see, and I'm going to be looking defensively as well for the interior of the defensive line. Now, maybe not so much week one because you're not going to see a ton of those starters. But that was one, if you will, weak spot or the weakest spot of the Saints defense last year. And we're talking about this defense on paper has the opportunity to be an elite defense, a top 10 defense. Well, you got to see the middle of that defensive line really elevate their game from a year ago as well.
And I'll tell you, we both talked about how excited we are to see Fuaga and Kool-Aid McKinstry play against different teams. Christian Boyd has been a beast. And one-on-one, they don't call them the Oklahoma drills anymore. I'm showing my age. But when the practices have been a little bit more physical in scrimmage situations, Christian Boyd has been a very hard man to block. So, that's a player that you're going to see, into the second half, and probably a lot of reps from. So I'm excited to see if Christian Boyd translates his early camp success into preseason success as well.
And finally, for me, I don't want to say quarterback because that's no fun. But yeah, I am going to be watching that very closely. For two reasons. One, it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun to evaluate young quarterbacks, guys that are talented quarterbacks. Two, you do have to have it kept in the back of your mind. Like, there is a reason the Saints have drafted a quarterback the last 2 years, even if it be day 3 guys, right? And that's for insurance. Because if Derek Carr has another start, and we talked about this at nauseum this offseason, but if Carr has another bad start, you guys saw, and I'm sure some of you were in the stands for the turn on Derek Carr last year. Trust me, it'll come quicker if the start is poor again. And you got to see who the potential future is. So that's where my eyes are, Bob. Let's close out the show with our favorite game, Dot or Drop. And we'll make it camp / preseason edition. We're going to extend the game to 3 questions both ways. Right,
Okay.
so you got to get 6 total questions before we sign off. So my first one to you, Bob, dot or drop. Derek Carr plays more than one series.
Drop. I want Derek Carr to play more than one series. Listen, you have a new offensive coordinator, a new system. I want these top line starters that are healthy. I mean, if you have even a chipped fingernail, you're sitting out. But if you're healthy, I want you in there as many reps as possible. I've said this with Derek Carr. I'd probably sit Kamara, Olave. Definitely, I don't expect Shaheed to play because of his hamstring. But I want to get Carr as many reps as possible in the new system. I want to get Fuaga and Penning as many reps as possible in the new system because you have to establish continuity. But do I think it'll happen? No. I think Derek Carr will have one series unless it's a 3 and out. If they even pick up a couple of first downs, let alone score, then Derek Carr's done for the night, as are most of those number 1 guys after one series. My daughter drop, tough one. My daughter drop. After Carr has a seat, Spencer Rattler, not Jake Haener, is going to be the next quarterback in.
Drop. I think Haener is going to be the number 2, quote unquote, if you will, from not just the depth chart, but just he's earned the right to play against the number 2s, to where Rattler, being the rookie, just naturally gets to play against the number 3s, the number 4s, and what have you. And look, I've said this from the jump too. It's Haener's job to lose, not Rattler's.
It should be.
So I think Haener's going to get the first cracks up at it. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, dot or drop, Jordan Howden gets more reps than the rest of the quote-unquote starters on the defensive side of the ball, especially with the news of Justin Simmons this week.
Dot, because of the news of Justin Simmons. I think Will Harris is going to be right up there too, as far as reps go. Listen, what Tyrann Mathieu can do. There's no need, if he plays at all, there's no need to play him any more than like a series. But the whole reason you're talking to Justin Simmons, as you should be, is because you have some questions at whoever the starter is going to be alongside Mathieu, whether it's Jonathan Abram, whether it's Jordan Howden, who they've penciled in as that starter, whether it's Will Harris. So unless you've signed Justin Simmons by Saturday, which I only think is a slim possibility, then you want to play Howden, you want to play Harris as much as possible. If there's still a question on whether you're going to get Simmons or not, or if there's still a question on whether you even need Simmons or not, Howden and Harris are going to have the opportunities to show that. So yeah, I see both Will and Jordan getting a lot of reps. I'm going to dot that question. My daughter drop, more of a multiple choice. Yeah, I'll give I'll, as I always seem to, I'll modify the daughter drop rules. Pick the linebacker that you think will have the better night against the Arizona Cardinals. Anthony Orji, DeMarco Jackson, or Kalike Hudson. Or D, none of the above, and then fill in name there.
The bias plays into this one big time, Bob. DeMarco Jackson. I'm excited to see him, right? A guy who we've both been really high on, but because of injury and some other things, I think is, running out of opportunities to be a guy who cracks the rotation, if you will, or being anything more than a special teams guy. So I think he's going to shine in his opportunity. He's a guy who has it in between the ears. There are a lot of guys that don't have it in between the ears. DeMarco really does. Size has always been an issue for him, but hopefully the brains and dissecting plays and going and putting not just himself, but other guys in position to make plays is going to have him pull away from the rest of the pack, if you will. All right, last one for you. I think we'll keep it simple. Dot or drop. Saints win preseason week 1.
I'm going to dot it. Winning preseason games all come. Yeah, first of all, it does not matter who gets the W in these preseason games. That never concerns me. But you and I, given our position in the media, we like the preseason because it allows us to dissect the back half of the roster, the last part of the last battles for the final spots on the depth chart. But the Arizona Cardinals are not a talented team. I mean, they'll be lucky to win 5 games this year, and that's just the 1 and 2s. I think the Saints are a deeper team than what people give them credit for. Yes, there are some positions that the depth scares the hell out of me. But in general, I think the Saints 90-man roster is far better than that of the Arizona Cardinals. So not that it matters, but I will dot the Saints get the win in week 1 at Arizona. I'll keep it equally simple for you. Dot or drop, the New Orleans Saints will ultimately sign Justin Simmons.
I'm going to dot it. They've been talking since spring. Will Harris is a close friend. You've brought up Harris a few times, so he's a close friend. Both attended the same school. I want to say Harris was a senior when Simmons was a freshman or vice versa, however that worked. The fact they've had conversation for so long, I think, is telling, even though they were far apart. Allegedly, now they're a little bit more on the same page now. I think it ultimately gets done. Again, I don't think it gets done like today. I don't think it gets done tomorrow, but I think it gets done. I do expect him to field other calls and other offers, if you will, but I think it gets done. And then DJ throws a dot or drop in there. DJ says dot or drop. Are we making hats and shirts? It's a dot. We will do it.
We will,
but How much of this do we divulge to people?
From my end, I got to be careful. Yeah.
We need money. So with that said, obviously this, opportunity that we enlightened you guys about, a month or so ago with Minute Media does open that opportunity, and we do, expect to take whatever money we do make off of these opportunities to invest it into things like that, or other things that you guys want to see, improvements to the show, improvements to equipment, getting hats, t-shirts, running some more giveaways and things like that. But the check's got to hit first. Any of you guys that are watching that are super interested in stuff like that, reach out to us. We'll try to make something work. Even if we can get some prototypes out to you guys, just to get you guys something in your hands.
Yeah. And you know what? If any of you are designers and you want to design a logo for us too, we can make sure, not only to give you credit, but we could see if we could work something out. But obviously, any logo that goes up on the show promos, T-shirts, hats, etc. If it's that darn good, we'll always have your name attached to it as long as Brendan and I are living members of the Bayou Blitz podcast. You notice the way I put that.
I was gonna say, that's depressing, but okay. All right, Bob. Way to bring that in. Way to wrap up the show, Bobo. With that said, Bob, you've been busy since you've got back from vacation. Obviously, it's a busy time of year as football starts becoming a little bit more real. So you got more and more going on. So with all that, where can people follow you, your work, and your coverage of the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, I appreciate you folks, bearing with us. I didn't take the week completely off last week, but pretty darn close. But getting back into the swing of things, I'll be coming out with another 53-man roster prediction, as well as continuing to write about training camp position battles, individual position battles. So stay tuned for that as well. And all of that work, I'm going to continue to publish on my personal pages, Bob Rose on Facebook, at BobbyR2613 on Twitter. Make sure you guys give our Bayou Blitz Facebook page a follow and Bayou Blitz Twitter page a follow as well, at Bayou Blitz. What is it, Brendan? I'm still on vacation mode.
Bayou Blitz Pod.
Okay, at Bayou Blitz Pod. I apologize, folks. Like I said, my brain got fried on the beach, and I'm in no hurry to get it back to full Tony Stark form yet. But again, I appreciate y'all reaching out to me as well. Last week, I had a lot of personal things going on. Pretty much all of them good. For all of you that sent messages and kind words, thank you for that. Nothing but love for you. And I'm, like Brendan said, I'm back into the swing of things now.
Yeah, same for me. I had a lot of personal things going on. Mostly good stuff. Just been busy. Move 60 days out from my wedding, which is nuts. Today, yeah, like I can legally, submit applications for a marriage license now. So, there's just a lot going on. And so thank you ahead of time for bearing with us when we get to that part of the season, like the week 4, week 5, week 6, like that part of the season. It's going to be weird. There's definitely going to be things that get moved around schedule wise. So just thanks ahead of time for all of that.
Well, not only that, hey, I have a bit of good news, good but bittersweet if you're a parent, that I also received in the last few days. I'm actually going to end up out in California at some time in October. I'm hoping that it coincides with Saints Chargers. That still has remained to be has yet to be determined. But my daughter, Brianna, she will be graduating with her master's from Walsh University out in Canton, Ohio this weekend. So I'll be out there attending that ceremony. But she already got a job offer and has accepted it out in Bakersfield, California. So after she graduates and passes her boards, she will be out there, moving out there sometime in October. So, like I said, bittersweet as a parent, but definitely joyous news to share. So, yeah, you're getting married in October. With any luck and collective intelligence on our part, we'll be able to coincide your wedding week with my week of being out in Cali, so that way we can just take 1 week off together. Again, we'll see how that works out for us.
I was going to say, with us, what's going to happen. You know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be like the day that I get home, you're like leaving.
Yep.
That's usually how that works. Well, for myself, you guys can follow me and all of my different endeavors at BT Boylan on Twitter, at BT Boylan on Instagram. For any of you that got to, tune in and hang out and see some of the selections from the Reel to Reel International Film Festival, appreciate your support. It was a blast being a part of the selection committee, hanging out with Fonte, Big Pooh, the rappers from the group Little Brother, that you guys may remember from the early 2000s, getting a chance to hang out with them, see their documentary, and all the other fantastic filmmakers that came out. It was a lot of fun. So you guys that supported, we appreciate that. And we will be back a week from today to talk about what a Saints football game.
Right.
It's a magical time of year, guys. Now, I will say, if we do hear any news when it comes to Justin Simmons or any other potential free agents, Bob and I now have the magic to, especially with Minute Media, so shout out Minute Media and their podcast network. We have the magic to have what we like to call in the industry as emergency podcasts, where we can come on live. We can record it. If you don't catch it live, you can catch it on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you find your podcast. So until next Wednesday, or for you fans that are a little paranoid about the Justin Simmons news, maybe you got your fingers crossed to hear from us before Wednesday with an emergency pod. Bob and I will be back at you as soon as we can with the latest and best Saints coverage. So then, find peace, spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Bayou Blitz podcast. See you guys.
Good night, all.